Hey, what's up? Got a reality check here for you. Operation Warp Speed, right? While we're busy being distracted about this election and stuff, and there's the current time and date kind of thing for you. While we're being distracted by this stuff, some other stuff is going on. I mean, it's not too deep under the surface, but for those of us, I would say the primary things of the election. And Operation Warp Speed is warping right along, and I just want to give my two pennies on it, my two uneducated, completely wingnut wacko, whatever you want to call it, maybe pennies on it. But I think maybe we need a doubting Thomas voice, to say the least, about what's going on here. People are polarized, of course, and they're sided up with like the Trump or Biden side camps, the so-called left, the so-called right, all of this kind of stuff, and they're not really realizing this is the same thing they do every election year, to say the least, let alone with government in general. That's why we have the two-party system that takes plus or minus 98% of all votes every single election of any kind. Just about, of course there's some exceptions to that rule, but it's very few and very far between. So what's going on is people put their trust in one side, their faith in one side, and they think that, okay, this side will never do me wrong, and of course, if you want to see what we are like, look at the other side. Look at the people on the other side of the river. If you're a conservative, look at the liberals and think about how dumb if you're that type of person. If you're not, if you're more middle of the road and understanding and, forgiving of people, all the better. But maybe if you're a little more like me, where I'm trying to be more understanding and forgiving, but on the same time, I look at people all across the board and just think we're all fucking idiots. So I would say look across the river, see the other people over there and what idiots they look like to you, and that's what we are, okay? And as soon as you think otherwise, then we're twice as dumb as them, right? If we think we're not, like, if we're not doubting ourselves and realizing that there's no perfect solution, there's no perfect person out there, there's none of this, no matter what. This, I come from a Bible believing perspective, so if you're not in tune with that and you have no desire to hear what somebody who considers themselves in tune with that has to say, see ya, thanks for giving it a shot. And second of all, on that note, kind of, is if you're an honor person, same thing goes. That is dumb shit. I'm going to put it out there like that, with all due respect. And the same thing for all the shit out there, including my shit, whatever you want to call it. It's dumb. You know what I mean? If you're going along on the Anon train, you're a fucking idiot. I'm sorry. I say that with all love and all due respect. But the more I see of that, the more I just realize, wow, sayonara. You know what I mean? I don't wish harm or anything on anybody, but if you're a Bible believing person and you're following along with a non-crap, I can only pray for you. Honestly, pull your head out of your ass, please. That's what I'm here for. I hope you don't take offense to me. If you do, sorry, get your news or your whatever from somewhere else. But otherwise, I'm here to help. I'm here to slap you till you wake up. I found you unconscious in a ditch. You know what I mean? I don't necessarily have all the answers, but I'm somebody who's still conscious, running around, and I'm willing to throw you on my back and let's go. So here's the facts, the so-called facts that I got right now. I'm not trying to be like QAnon with this stuff, like, oh, here's another Q drop, or none of that crap. This has nothing to do with any of that crap whatsoever, but it is leaning towards stuff that I think that mostly and only mostly conservative leaning people, or so-called conservative leaning people around this election, are going to identify with. The vast majority of so-called liberals are not going to identify with what I'm saying. Maybe some of you will, if you happen to be a liberal that finds this video, but that would be rad. That you are rad if you're a liberal and you'd actually hear me out without, whatever. Okay, so here we go. Here's a recent 60 Minutes. This was released apparently this is the 60 Minutes official channel on YouTube, released November 9th, 2020. As you can see, it is November 10th, 2020. So this was released yesterday, supposedly. Sometimes these dates are a day off, so I wouldn't, exactly hold whatever to whatever. And this show was obviously produced some amount of days before this, I would imagine. So that being said, it's probably the most was shown to me as a quote-unquote new video when I looked it up. It said new, so I think it's, we can say that it's a pretty recent video, right? So anyway, yeah, I need to punch in one. I'll let this play and get the first little...
Are you ready to go if a vaccine is approved tomorrow?
Yes, we are.
What's the first order you're going to give?
It's a simple command of execute.
So once you say execute, how fast does it get out there?
Within 24 hours.
Do you have doses of vaccine already stockpiled?
Yes, we do.
How many do you have stockpiled?
I'm holding on to that number right now because I want to not create anxiety and we need to work through the details.
Okay, there you go. That was a lot of stuff packed in right there. For one thing, if you close your eyes and listen to that, tell me it doesn't sound... I mean, when I was first listening to it, I was doing other stuff, and I heard that in the background, and it sounds like a movie. It sounds like a scripted movie. But whatever, I'm not trying to make any accusations of that crap. And to whatever degree, I think this stuff is kind of chopped up, edited, and rehearsed, but... So what's going on here is he's saying, execute 24 hours, da-da-da, right? Like, oh, he's got vaccine stockpiled. He won't tell us how much. You know what I mean? I can understand if this was like a foreign operation and it's like, some military foreign operation thing against like an enemy or a domestic operation against an enemy. But this is a domestic operation against the citizens of this motherfucking country. And this dude doesn't want to tell us even a ballpark of how many vaccines he supposedly has. For another thing is that on this same very day was the first time that there was any announcement that there was supposedly by Pfizer, who is not part of Warp Speed, who is not yet officially part of this program, supposedly, that they have a 90% effective vaccine. Not 90% safe, not 90% da-da-da-da-da, but just quote-unquote 90% effective vaccine, right? So this guy already is saying that the military has a stockpile, a quote-unquote stockpile of vaccines ready to go on 24 hours notice. Well, what vaccines are those? Because all the ones we've heard about are plus or minus 80% dangerous. Not even effective necessarily, but 80+% for the most part. The reports I'm seeing surface are through that so-called news media that thinks they can, project and elect the president ahead of time, regardless of what the courts haven't even made a judgment on and all that. But according to them, even them, the liberal media, so-called, pushing this vaccine, 80-90% of people are having severe side effects from most of these vaccines. So I have to assume that the only vaccines that they have would be either placebos, maybe, and the whole thing of placebos is like, I've heard that, what was it, meningitis or malaria or something like that? There was some other vaccine they were using as a quote-unquote placebo in the COVID vaccine trials, and it's like, and people were having severe side effects and death from that one. And it's like, when have you ever heard of them giving another medication as a placebo? That doesn't make... Isn't that supposed to be like a saline solution or something? Like, you're going to give another medication that is equally likely, roughly, to have side effects? Like, wow. I mean, this is going by just what I, as a normal human being, can find on the good old internet, right? So I'm more than happy to take in any information whatsoever, from anybody that could, because it's like, okay, is the news media lying to me? I wouldn't be surprised, but can I get any info here? And then when you talk to this military general guy, the army general guy, he's saying that, he doesn't want to create anxiety, so he's not going to tell us how much he has stockpiled. Well, when I think of that, I think, well, okay, if you don't have any stockpiled, if you were to say you don't have any, but you can act on a 24-hour notice, I mean, then I'm wondering, like, where are you getting those from? You know, like, I heard it takes like maybe a month to fill an order. I don't know if I wrote that on my little quick scribbly notes right here, but I was hearing, I want to say a little bit earlier when I was doing a little bit of looking around and listening on this, that it takes about a month for them to sort of really roll out. It's not really 24 hours, but this guy's like wanting to be like, yeah, 24 hours, you know, like whatever. And just the way he said it was kind of rehearsed and stuff. So this whole anxiety thing, then I think like, okay, what if they have the 300 million? That's the first big number they're putting out there, like 300 million, right? So that's like what percent of the population, you know, 360-ish million people, supposedly, I guess, maybe. They want to try and get 70% of adults within 6 months. So what if they already have what if they already have 100,000 vaccines or whatever amount they have? Like, where did they get those from? What, you know, just like I said a minute ago, you know, like, what is that? That's got to be the dangerous stuff, right? This 90% effective that we don't even know the dangers of necessarily, or at least it hasn't been spewed out by the propaganda machines yet, is what I would think. That's what I think all that stuff is. It's brand new. It's as new as, it's probably newer than this interview, or roughly the same. You know, it dropped today or yesterday or whatever, that info. And so it's bizarre that they would say that. So what do you guys have? A bunch of placebo vaccines? And then they say, oh, it takes 2 doses, you know, which we've been hearing, you know, that, oh, it's going to be 21 days apart, 2 doses, And the thing is, okay, so they're using this program called Tiberius that's only 2 months old at the time of this taping of this 60 Minutes interview, which is probably relatively recent. And this program is supposed to track when, you know, supposed to be this highly effective program and stuff. And I don't doubt like that it's going to be relatively, it looks like military software, and the little bits and pieces of military software I've ever seen are usually pretty good if they're not from third-party contractors, if they're from the military itself. And when I was watching, I think it was on the same 60 Minutes thing right here, they show a little demonstration of it, and it has the look and the ring of real military software. It doesn't look like clunky, crappy, bubbly prototype from some third-party outfit. So on that, that's saying one thing, that I think, you know, the military is capable of producing some of the best software. I'll just say that from a really generic, just opinionated perspective, not really truly informed, I would say, but, you know, as an outsider perspective, as a software developer myself, what I see and how I've, you know, of course I know some veterans and stuff like that, and I've interacted with veterans. I've tutored veterans on programming. So on that level, I do have, I would say, a little bit of insight on that. But anyway, the program's called Tiberius, right? And the guy who wrote it said that one of the issues is that the first dose isn't going to be that big a deal, but tracking second doses and beyond is going to be, quote unquote, really hard, you know, with this 2-month-old program. And I don't care how good you are at writing software, 2 months old is a baby for software. You know what I mean? Anything less than a year old, it's kind of like the same thing as you think with like vaccines or other medications, where it's like, you know, when you're talking in terms of months and not years with software, that's not a mature product. You know, not to say that something from the military couldn't be very mature at 9-10 months, a year or whatever, versus something from the outside might take twice or longer to reach, you know, not even probably as mature, as good a quality and stability and stuff. But that being said, that's kind of sketch. You know, this is vaccines going into people's body, and it's going to be really hard in a program that hasn't been thoroughly debugged, supposedly, stuff like that. That's one thing, is that you really don't know what you're dealing with software until you release it, and it becomes production, till it's dropped in production, so to speak. So if anything, the internet's taught a lot of us that. So you can test all you want in your little sandboxed environment, but you never know. Once you get into the real world, there are just so many variables out there that you can knock a lot of them out in your little sandbox environment, but you've got to expect as much, maybe more, in the real world. And that, there's hardcore products that have been around for decades that still get regular updates. Every few months they're releasing significant updates. Look at the stupid Windows operating system. How often do you get updates on that thing? You know what I mean? So obviously there's no perfect software. That being said, a lot of it is features and not necessarily all bug fixes, but we know there are bug fixes. So vaccines probably need bug fixes too. That's going into your body. There's no vaccine ever been proven safe or effective. Okay. I'm not trying to say that no vaccine is safe or effective. But I'm telling you that that has never been established by any truly reputable entity, like a government, like the United States government specifically, that I'm speaking of. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So I'm going to go ahead. I wrote down a couple times on this video, so it looks like 610 is the next one.
That capability to an administration site.
Because this is a once-in-a-century pandemic, the vaccine is already being manufactured in bioreactors inside sterile facilities like this one at Emergent BioSolutions in Baltimore.
Because this is a once-in-a-century pandemic, it's already being manufactured? That doesn't make any sense. How does that equate to the other half of that argument? Because this is a once-in-a-century pandemic, is he trying to say because this is a really dangerous, supposedly dangerous pandemic, that they're already trying to roll out the vaccine? Is that why he's saying that? What the time period between how often these blown out of proportion pandemic things happen is once in a century? Yeah. So I guess he does make sense there, because if you think back to the Spanish flu, and roughly 100 years ago, then yeah, it's the same thing. It's a flu being blown out of proportion, where Bayer is one of the big people on board who gets accused of supplying supplies. This time I think they were behind the ventilators, right? And before they were behind was it plain aspirin? You can look it up. Don't take my word on any of this. And it was the same thing back then, where they were saying they were probably using that stuff to pump people full of aspirin or whatever it was, and make their fever go crazy and stuff like that with that flu back then, to make it to boost their symptoms, to make it seem like more severe than it was. And did the intubations not cause more harm than good? Do they not blame the fact that the death rates are on a huge decline, insane decline? All they talk about is cases. They can't talk about death rates anymore, can they? Besides the one that has totally inflated numbers. And don't take my word on that at all. Go make your own judgment on that. But that 230 whatever thousand number that it's currently around, that number includes auto accidents, people who died with 2 or 3 comorbidities. That means they died with 2 or 3 other things that are as much or more likely to have killed them than COVID. The only thing it says is that they either tested positive of COVID, not necessarily that they died of any symptoms of it, not necessarily they couldn't breathe and their lungs filled up with pus like COVID supposedly does to a very, very, very few amount of people. It just means that they either tested positive for COVID. A person in an auto accident tested positive for COVID because they swiped them. And by doing that, they get a lot of money. We know they get tens of thousands of dollars for doing that and producing COVID patients. And so if they do that, then that counts as a COVID death, right? Well, then if you go back and look, and it's like, well, you know what? For a while, people weren't being tested, arguably at the time when the deaths were ramping up the highest. Like the March, April surge, right? All that kind of stuff. Well, those were, a lot of them were presumed cases, and now even they've tried to like say that those tests weren't even effective. Most of those tests that they did even have, you know, like it's just ridiculous. And then you can go look at the guy who invented the PCR test, which isn't even supposed to be a quote unquote medical test. It's a quote unquote medical experiment. And he says that the worst thing that can happen with that is to use it in a medical setting, as though it's to diagnose illnesses. Viral illnesses. That's the worst thing you can use it for. It's totally a scientific experimentation device, and other reputable people around that project have said the same thing and confirmed it. So it's freaking ridiculous. And I got this info I got from David Knight's show. I was watching it, and then it showed this clip, and I was like, oh, I'm going to go check out that 60 Minutes thing. One thing David Knight claims, I mean, he's got a lot of good information, but he's one of those people who just, a lot of these people, and this is why I don't like Q, one of the main reasons, but, you know, amongst more than one, is that they'll run off. You know, it's one thing to take, if you want to call it conspiracy theory or whatever, you know, to take something like that and walk with it versus running off with it into conspiracy peddler territory, where you're just like, oh, I'm just going to crank the burner up as hot as I can get it, you know, until whatever. And that's what he's doing. That's what Alex Jones does all the time. That's what he's doing. And it pisses me off because these are the most legitimate sources of news. I hate to say it. You know what I mean? I hate to say it. But it's almost like saying go to the WWF, the WWE to get your news, because that's how bad this country's got. There's no trustworthy news source. There's no trustworthy journalistic source. They're all crap. They're all tainted. And he said, he was talking about the PCR machine, and he's like, oh, you know, everybody's running it at 40, and that's giving a 90%, you know, the 40 value on the knob, and that's giving it a 90% error rate and stuff. And if they just turn it down to 30, it would give them a much more accurate thing, but nobody will do that. And da-da-da-da-da. And fuck you, you liar, because that's not it. Did you not do your homework? I've heard you say that night after night. Do your homework on that test. The guy who invented it said, the problem, one of the main problems with the test, is that you can't tune it. You can't, if you're getting too many positive results at 40, you might turn it down to 30 and get even more. And then you might turn it up to 31 and get less, and then turn it up to 32 and get more again. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the problem, is it can't be calibrated like that. Does that make sense? You know, you can actually run it at 40 and get less true positives than if you ran it at 30. That's a possibility. And it doesn't matter. It varies by who knows what. It varies by the temperature, the day, the machine, whatever. They haven't been able to crack that nut on it when they invented it, you know, so since they've invented it. So that's what's crazy with that. So we know there's fishy shit going on, and this stuff all smells like Nazi shit to me. Straight up. And all you people need to wake the fuck up, or just take that pill and go to sleep for life, because if you can't see this shit coming from both sides, then you're fucking tripping, Holmes. Straight the fuck up. Sorry to be so fucking blunt, but you know what? I can't believe how dumb people are with this shit. It's been going on for almost a year.
It has not yet been approved by the FDA Solutions
What?
in Baltimore. Even though it has not yet been approved by the FDA.
They're cranking it out. Hasn't even been approved by the FDA.
Vice President Sean Kirk says it can take up to 6 weeks to produce a single batch.
It then leaves.
Take up to 6 weeks. So that's supposedly maximum, right? But here we are with what we've got to assume, unless you can show me otherwise, that 3/4 or more of the people are having adverse effects on, and it's taking them, you know, upwards of 6 weeks to roll it out. But yet dude in the military says he can roll this shit out in 24 hours. Yeah, I believe he can start setting up stations, whatever.
Here and moves to another facility where it gets filled into the final vial presentation you're used to seeing when you're getting a vaccination at the clinic.
Emergent is shipping most of that vaccine to what's known as a fill-finish line, run by a company called...
Okay, so 6 weeks to produce the batch, already being manufactured, you know what I mean? And it's like, this is pre-COVID Pfizer safety, 90%, not safety, I'm sorry, effective they're already manufacturing something. So they're stockpiling what? You know, this, and it hasn't even, it's been tested for a matter of a few months. Like this, and they're stockpiling it, mRNA, all this other random crap that's like, who knows what about this stuff? You know what I mean? It's one thing to put out even a traditional vaccine this quick, which would still be way sketch, something they have decades and decades and decades and decades of experience doing, but they still haven't been able to prove the safety and efficacy of. But now they're going into this DNA stuff and the questions of it causing cancer, sudden death, all this stuff is just off the charts. And if you go to the United States vaccine courts, I always forget what it's called. This will find it. What is the vaccine court? National vaccine in if vaccines are still safe, why do we have a national vaccine injury compensation program? Why would we have that? And a .gov, HRSA.gov site, right? I need to dig back into these sites because some stuff's a little hidden below the surface, but it's there. I've been here, I've dug, I've read from the horse's mouthies. Or I meant to say horsey's mouths, but stupid. Anyway, I've been in here and I've read this stuff, but don't take my word for it. Do a little digging for yourself too. This is the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. It is vaccines save life by preventing disease. They make sure and put that right there, right? First sentence. Okay. Most people who get vaccines have no serious problem. Vaccines are like any medicines, can cause side effects. Oh, really? Well, the difference between these and any other medicines is we don't have the military banging on our door to give them to us, do we? Like a fucking Nazi police state over a false-ass fucking globalist pandemic, right? But most are very rare and very mild. Some health problems that follow vaccinations are not caused by vaccines. Bullshit. They cannot make that statement. They cannot make that statement because they do not know whether or not the side effects are caused by vaccines. And there was a committee put out by the United States government to try and make a determination on that. And they said that their own committee was not focused enough to make that determination. It was too general. Their only conclusion was that they need more data, that we need more focused subcommittees that could really dig in and really do a more focused, targeted response on individual vaccines and patients and things like that, because all they have to go by is mass aggregate data by regular run-of-the-mill healthcare facilities for the most part, things like that. Well, I guess they did say some health problems that follow vaccinations are not caused by vaccines, so that technically is a truth statement then. But some are, probably just as likely some are, right? But to say that without the backing data either way is just like, why are they even putting that out there? It's propagandic, very much so. In very rare cases, a vaccine can cause a serious problem, such as a severe allergic reaction, which, you know, that's probably true. But once again, even though I would say that I've heard enough cases of people having this happen to them that I would want to say personally, yeah, this is true. Even my own mother, okay, who's never been an anti-vaxxer, she talked me into getting a tetanus shot when I was younger, you know, and I was scared to death of needles, rightfully so. But she had a mass reaction to one that made her not even ever want to get a vaccination again because it was so bad. And then she convinced me still with that reaction. She was hallucinating and everything from it, supposedly, right? But that's the thing, is that they don't know, like, if you get a vaccine, there's usually a reason. The one thing that could be said, if they did track the data better, which may be one of the reasons why they don't, but if there's not any sort of epidemic going around and you have no reason to take the vaccine other than general paperwork and you have a side effect, then that's probably an instance where they could have that data to some degree and say that a vaccine did specifically cause a side effect. But otherwise, like in a situation with a tetanus shot, or, you know, now with the COVID thing or whatever, they can always put up the claim that, oh, you just had COVID and you were a little late on the vaccine, and, you know, you're actually experiencing the symptoms of COVID, or vice versa. You know, like, you could argue it either way. So that's where that data is still in the air. But anyway, this National Vaccine Compensation Program, Injury Compensation Program, may provide financial compensation to individuals who file a petition and are found to have been injured by the covered vaccine. Even in cases in which such a finding is not made, petitioners may receive compensation through a settlement. So, with or without investigation, you might receive the payment, but of course, there obviously are. It sounds like maybe like the IRS or something where they audit a certain percentage of them, maybe, but might not get around to all of them. I don't know the exact details on that. So, if you dig into here, vaccine data. Compensation data. See if I can find it in a relatively short time. Table, vaccine injury table effective between 2015 and 2017. Okay, revised. Effective March. Revised is scary, but I'll go by that one. Maybe it's not scary, but I'm just leery, I should say, of that. So, let's see here. I mean, it's at this HRSA Gov site. Please feel free to go there, of course, and like look this up for yourself. Half the time whenever I'm trying to like give a narration for like some type of a screencast, then I'll just overlook stuff because my mind's on so many things. And I remember jumping back over here one day trying to real quick find some results that I'd found before, and I thought, oh, those were just right there. And it's like, wow, I must have really had to dig to find that, just like what's occurring right now. There's a simple freaking table somewhere, like some pages into one of these PDFs, that tells you, it must be this unrevised one, maybe 2015 through 2017, or maybe it's that other. Lots of like redundant duplicate looking links here. So there's a lot of data in here. You know, vaccines containing tetanus toxoid, which would I imagine be a tetanus shot, right? Illness, disability, injury, or condition covered. Anaphylaxis or anaphylactic shock, the time period for the first symptom or manifestation of onset of significant aggravation after vaccine administration, 4 hours. So it looks like they just have a rough table of you know, windows for when certain symptoms appeared and stuff like that. And so if you fall within these partitions here, then you're probably going to be awarded, I would imagine, but I couldn't say for sure, of course. So these look like, come on, where's that data? I'll just skip out of here if I can't find it, like maybe on the next one. How to file vaccine. This is why I want this data. What am I not seeing here? Infographics, it's usually not, maybe it is, but infographics are usually really dumb. Like, oh, here's a big teddy bear with a shock going into its arm or something goofy. What's going on? Is it glitching out? Okay, yeah, exactly. You see how it's just like big giant, like, oh yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's helpful for some people. But this is all the stuff that, like, it's just a waste of megabytes that somebody got paid to make that could fit on a single page in a regular PDF. We can file data, resources. Oh man, it makes me mad. I know it says exactly how many like seasonal flu vaccines people are awarded. What's this? Program data report. Updated 2020. Definitely scary on that one. What? It says it's supposed to be a PDF. Where's it at? Okay, this is looking like it. The sketch thing is that this has been updated because the one I went to before was previous data. It wasn't 2020 yet. I'm sure I have it saved somewhere. Okay, so you know, you got all this stuff, Hep, influenza. So here's influenza, as you can see, very large number, right? That's 1 billion, 1.5 billion, more than 1.5 billion distributed in the US. Number of, no way. That's hundreds, thousands, millions, billions. Number of doses distributed in the US, okay, from 2006 through 2018. So that's over a decade. So that makes sense that like 1.5 billion would be. But this is way aggregate. Like, that's a little too aggregate. Compensation, Composite. No, these numbers are not. This is ridiculous. This is not what I was seeing on the last one. I'm gonna find that freaking PDF I have. This is doctored. It's making me sick. This is doctored, or else I'm not seeing something. Because let me get rid of this stupid thing here. Come on. I'll just tell you what. There's way more. It's like around 80% of people are compensated. Not this little, like, these don't even match the yearly figures of compensation down here. Give me a freaking break. It's insane. It's like the vast majority of cases are compensated for the seasonal flu. What do we have here? Attorney's fees. Oh man, I'm pissed. You can go to archive.org maybe. Go archive.org. And if they had use the same file name and stuff, we can paste that right in there. That's only if it's identical file name. Which you can see this file name's only been used in 2020, so it's well, there's April. Let's see here. That would have been about the time that I would have came here. So this should be the older one. Maybe not. This one is through April. So maybe I was looking at a different file. I mean, I definitely was looking at a different file, but anyway, like I said, don't take my word for it. So maybe it's better I didn't find it for now. Anyway, I'll stick to the subject. I promise you that I don't make unbacked claims on any of that stuff, but I'm not perfect, of course. But I'll tell you what, the data is there. I want to say 88% of seasonal flu claims to that court were awarded. Okay. The next spot here, it's not FDA approved, was where we left off on my little notes. This guy.
The vaccine's secure.
Armed guards?
Yes,
Armed guards at sites where the vaccine is stockpiled.
yes.
Once it starts moving, whether on a truck or a plane, is it going to be under guard?
Yes, that's as far as I'm going to talk about it, though, right? Because you don't want to lay out all the plans, but
Why not? Who cares if is it under armed guards? Like what? You know, are any vaccines under armed guards? It's like, okay, if you just say yeah, it's under some armed guards or whatever, then okay, well, then it's at least as protected or more than any other vaccine that everybody gets stuck in their arm. Not everybody, but a lot of people, right? So it's like, why do you want to be so secret? Once again, this guy's trying to be secretive about stuff, like for no reason, just arbitrarily secret. Where's the transparency that this motherfucking government's supposed to have with us? You know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm saying. This country was built on militias. You know, I'm not a member of a militia or anything like that. I'm not anti-government, nothing. When I was younger, I definitely questioned the government a lot, and you could have maybe called me, or I maybe would have referred to myself as being like anti-establishment for sure. But now it's like I'm older. I realize that, you know, there's some realities of life that are just realities, and that, you know, like what's the next thing that could happen, you know? So it's like, you get rid of this government, what are you looking at? Like China comes in, like especially if Biden comes in, right? You know, he's letting China in under the hood. But otherwise, we still have our own military industrial complex to work with. And these are I don't want to generalize the military, because I know a lot of cool people and legit people, and I've seen people in documentaries, TV, everything that went through the military. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying there's not a lot of respectable people. I'm not saying there's not people who've gone and lost their life. You know, there's people who have lost their life saving foreigners in countries, you know, like what was going on with Iraq. Watch the Gunnar Palace documentary. If there's people who have gone in and taken care of business and done what they could to help those people in those countries that we basically invaded, you know, for the most part, to put it really generally, right? And there are people who lost their lives trying to protect the citizens and families in those countries, you know, not just being big imperialist thug nation in there. So don't get me wrong about the military, you know what I mean? I see things from as much as possible an unbiased perspective. So when I see this guy, I'm not happy with what I'm seeing. This is an interview from stupid 60 Minutes chopped up. It could be portraying him in the wrong light. He might just be excited to be on here and doing the best he can. You know, he looks like he's got a big old freaking gut like I do, you know, like he's whatever. I don't know. He just seems like a dopey idiot like I am. You know what I mean? So I'm not trying to say like that I'm any better than these people or these people are bad or whatever, but I don't like what I'm hearing on this interview is what I'm saying. And this whole thing, this country's supposed to be for the people. You know what I mean? This country was established by militias, and now we've turned into a military industrial complex. And the thing is that Trump, you know, to his credit, or, you know, to Yahweh Shah, to God's credit, that he is not starting new wars. Well, he's not feeding this beast, right? You know, this beast is used to getting fed. Like, it needs, regardless of, you know, the people who are doing good, the whatever percentage of people in the military and even the military itself that is doing a lot of good, like not necessarily pumping people full of bullets, right? But there's all sorts of things the military does. So, but regardless, that included, that machine, just like a corporation, wants to thrive. It's got people at whatever ranks that move up the ranks. Corporations are modeled off a military structure, right? What we know of as corporations. So it's like they're working for that bottom line. That's what they're doing, you know, and they're trying to move up the ranks for the people who are high up in rank, have military careers. They have decades, you know, decade plus in the military kind of thing, and they don't get there by sitting there going, oh, you know, I don't want to get too involved in the military, you know what I mean? They're up in it, right? So that's the way it works, for better or worse. And there's all the different types of personality types that across the spectrum, you know, that go through there. So yeah, you're going to have sociopaths, right? You're going to have psychopaths. You're going to have people who want to fit in their clique and you know, you're going to have a mix of everything, I could imagine. And that's, you know, this guy just wants to retire with his stripes probably, and freaking, I don't know. At the end of the interview, he says some stuff about how he thinks it would be shameful that if the United States, shame on us if we get this vaccine for free and we don't take it, you know? And it's like, so what? Shame on us? Shame on us if we don't keep our freedom. You take your vaccine, we'll keep our freedom. We have the freedom to choose. You know what I mean? There's no evidence, there's no real evidence that this is any worse than a seasonal flu. Okay? So I've already crunched the numbers on one of my other videos. You're welcome to dispute that, you know, like, of course, like, not agree with me on that. But then if you got the numbers, show them to me. And the numbers I'm telling you that line up to not being worse than a seasonal flu are 7.8 billion population, over 1 million deaths worldwide, you know, including the 200 and whatever thousand deaths in the United States, including information specifically and only from the WHO and the CDC, using information from only those widely available sources in Wikipedia, you know, stuff like that, like only the most general, widely supposedly held sources, I can still prove that this is no worse. At worst, it is a seasonal flu. You know what I mean? It's a bad seasonal flu at worst, is what I should say. And people die of the seasonal flu every year. Vulnerable populations, a little bit young and a lot old, die of the seasonal flu, just like with COVID. Okay, so I'm going to go to 753 on here, or that's where we're at. I'll just keep letting it play.
The answer is yes.
Most of the vials will be shipped by the same companies that deliver packages to our homes every day.
Fuck FedEx. That's my personal opinion. I just want to inject that. On so many disgusting levels, this company is crap. They don't hire the best like UPS does. The people that UPS, at least I'm going from like 10 years ago, whatever experience with them, but that FedEx just, they hire kids and they treat them like crap, and UPS hires adults and they treat them good.
We're prepared to deliver to every zip code in this country.
Richard Smith runs FedEx Express in the
Look at this whole virtue signaling thing, sitting 6 feet away from the computer screen where he's, just to let you know, it's like they can't show you this interview and just show him because you might not think he's social distancing. You might not think this virus is fucking real if he's not like that, Give me a break.
U.S.,
Nazis.
which is already operating at peak volume to handle the surge in online shopping caused by the pandemic.
You've got another peak coming because of Christmas, and you've got another peak on top of that because that's when we expect the vaccine.
Fuck all you guys. Fucking idiots. Whatever. I did a whole thing on Christmas. Oh, I will do a whole thing on Christmas too for my Bible believing friends if I have any out there. Let's see here. What do we got? I don't have any other notes, it looks like. So yeah, like what I mentioned is, and sorry, I'm just pissed at these guys. Like, I just feel like these are establishment motherfuckers right here, as far as I'm concerned. It's like, fuck off. That's the way I feel with these people. That's my opinion. Yeah, the FedEx stuff. What do we got here? So the 70% of adults within 6 months of next year, they're expecting the so-called March-April surge of fear. The lady who comes up talks about hospitals that, like, her biggest fear is that hospitals will be overwhelmed with a surge of cases and the ICU units will be full. I guess ICU means intensive care unit, whatever. Not to belittle that, but the thing is that hospitals like to run at 90+% capacity. That's what they like. They like to have a bed available if somebody needs it, but they like to have the vast majority of them full because that's how they're cranking in their money, right? So to think that a hospital wants to run skeleton crews and all this stuff is ridiculous. Have you seen how industrious those buildings are and the whole medical industry? Like that, so when you hear these numbers like this hospital's at 90% or 100% capacity, guess what? They're loving it. That hospital, not necessarily the workers, nurses, doctors, everybody, they're worked hard in those conditions. I'm not trying to like make light of that, but the hospital as a company, as an organization, loves that. That's what they like. Just like, if you're working at a restaurant and it's a really, really busy night and you're like, I can't keep up. Hardly, I'm so tired. Well, guess what? That the people that are paying your paycheck, cutting your paycheck at that restaurant, they love that. They want that every night, So that's what I've got to say about this overwhelming capacity. And the thing is that hospitals setting up those tents, now they're all virtue signaling because those tents are a joke, right? And they've switched to like, oh, those were for overflow, to now they're just in case somebody tests positive or has symptoms of COVID or whatever. You know what I mean? They're not even really for the hospitals blowing out of capacity. Now they're just for like a little quarantined area, so to speak, if even that. But yeah, I mean, if you blow out that capacity, if you've got the hospital running, on all 8 cylinders, 100%, and the tents are full, and if you really had that, then yeah, okay. But we've never really had that. You know what I mean? New York never really had that because they had the motherfucking Red Cross ship sitting out there that they could have put patients in at any point in time if it was really like that. It was all fucking drama, Nazi motherfucking shit. Wake the fuck up. 40% of nurses say that they're going to refuse. That's the polling on the nurses is that I think it was 40% was all that said that they would get this vaccine. So that means 60% of nurses who part of their training, I was going to go to school to be a nurse. And the main thing that made me not want to go, the primary thing was, well, for one, it was like a year plus waiting list or whatever to get into even to the program. But for two, and even more importantly, was the forced inoculations. You had to get like a dozen or more vaccines and counting, like just to be a nurse and like a CNA kind of thing. And so I was like, forget that, and I was somebody who was like passionate about helping people. I was trying to be a caregiver and stuff, like all that kind of stuff. I was like really passionate about it. And that was it. I hit the brakes and I was like, nope, total, got to look for something else now, because that's not going to work. So those people who have already received a ton of vaccines, 60% of them are hesitant to get the COVID one. Like, what does that tell you? You know what I mean? People right up in it, in the industry, surrounded by the propaganda, all that. I'm sure that number will change. That's just the people on paper, maybe even anonymously, that say it now. Of course, they'll do what they can do, you know, just like they're going to do with us. They're going to try and get roughly half the people said, yeah, they'll probably take the vaccine or whatever. So they'll get the half the people to take it. And then they know that's the people who take little to no effort to convince to take it. It's only half the population though, right? Well, then half of the remaining population, they'll just do whatever propaganda and pressure tactics to get them to take it, you know, just turning up that heat until they just keep cornering and cornering and cornering that last percentage of people that won't get it. They're not going to be like, oh, 90%, that's good enough. You know, you last 10%ers that didn't want to get it. You know, we realize that, you know, logically speaking, that you guys shouldn't need to get it anyway, because at best it's only going to be 90% effective anyway. And we know the vaccines probably are, you know, if you look at the data, it's closer to 50% is if we're going to make a determination, because some years it looks like the vaccine didn't work, and sometimes it looks like it was worse than the year that they didn't take it for certain vaccines. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's where you have to say, well, just based on the general data, I would think that's what I have to say, that it's only 50-50 effectiveness, right? So even if 90% of the people, it's like, oh, they can't just like cut you a break just because you have your standards, you know? And plus, if you got the vaccine, you should be protected, right? You know, like, you should be fine. You got the vaccine. So I'm the one at risk, right? But no, those last few people, those are the ones they're going to say are the super spreaders. Those are the people, that's why we keep having to get inoculated. Oh, and then they'll do that, you know, and then after so many years of just routine bi-monthly inoculations, people are just going to get used to it. And what we're seeing is this democracy crumble before our eyes. And so you can guarantee a more and more authoritarian, totalitarian, whatever-tarian government you want to see is going to arise from the rubble. And that, once we're used to wearing masks, used to being inoculated, used to all this shit, that's when they're going to come in and be like, oh, you know what? Now it's time to make some adjustments here. Like, okay, we decided we don't like this particular race of people over here, so we're just going to start giving them this serum in their arm, you know? Oh, wow, it's so weird how people that are 90% African American have leukemia. 90% of people who are 90% or more African American, you know, I'm making this up, totally hypothetical, right? And then it's like, oh, well, they just died. And the ones that refuse to take this, well, we put them in a camp, you know, and you don't ever get to hear from them again. And this is just scratching the dystopian surface of it all, because it's a joke. Like, people think that they can sanitize the human race and they want to move to robotics and all this, you know. You got to realize the end goal of these people, who may or may not be alive by whatever time, want cyber humans. You know what I mean? They want just enough flesh to continue their existence into this freaking clean freak robot world, you know. And it sounds so sci-fi and so far off now, and it is, relatively speaking, but on the other hand, it's 5 minutes away. Because if you just look where we were 100 or 200 years ago and where we are now, and the rate that stuff is increasing, you know what I mean? You can see it. It's exponentially increasing in speed at the way these things are happening, you know. And they have an infrastructure that can already, you know what I mean? We're right on the dawn of replacing cars on the road with autonomous, which means self-operating, right? Self-driving electric fleets of vehicles and stuff. And electric is universal in the sense that you can have a gas-powered electric car, right? What are hybrids? You can have all that kind of stuff, but you can also have a nuclear-powered electric car. You can have a steam-powered electric car. You can have a wind power, you know? It doesn't matter. All you got to do is charge up some type of battery. And that battery doesn't even have to be like a lithium-ion cell. It could be a hydrogen fuel cell and go look up how many different types of hydrogen fuel cells there are. You know what I mean? That battery could be a bunch of rubber bands pulled back, just to be joking about it. You know what I mean? But like, that's literally the battery's just any type of cell that can store any type of energy. And if you can convert that from kinetic energy, like motion energy, into electrical energy, which is very easy to do. You know, when you talk into a microphone, you're talking against a little diaphragm that's just, you're just literally pulsating a little thing that's generating a little microcurrent, and that sound wave is generating electricity, you know? And of course there's, I'm sure you know, the sun, water, all that kind of stuff, you know? And things are just becoming more and more efficient and all that kind of stuff, which on one hand is really cool, right? That's there. But on the other hand, there's no free lunch, right? You know, they say like the Green New Deal and all this crap. It's the Green New Diarrhea. They've got to mine all this stuff. They're constantly mining all this material. And that's another thing. This is all this Nazi crap that they're doing. This is all part of make humans look like this viral crap on the earth that's just destroying the earth, right? And there's some truth to that. I mean, I think, aren't we all a little guilty of that? Like, we got to admit, right? But that's not the thing. It's like they're acting like, oh, what's so important is that this planet survives beyond us. Which, yeah, we want it to survive as long as possible for our future generations. Ideally, I would think real people would want that. You know, I'm a vegan. I'm not trying to like virtue signal or act like I'm high and mighty or anything, but I make choices like that. We don't drive. We don't own a car. We choose not to go those routes for various reasons. And it's like, okay, we walk our ass to the store. It's not that far. Like, we do those things. You know what I mean? Like, we just do simple things like that and go, instead of like going and starting up the car that we got to put a bunch of gas in and all this crap and drive it down the fucking road and all that crap, we don't do it. If we need to go somewhere that requires a vehicle, we can go down to a bus station, hop on a bus if we want. We can go hop on a train, hop on a plane if we wanted, or whatever, you know, like we have all those choices at our disposal, but we don't push that on other people. You know what I mean? We don't say, oh, why are you driving a car? Da, 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 da. All that, you know, who knows? For one thing, just in a neutral perspective, what if that person's going to drive you to the hospital when you need to go or whatever, you know, just to put that out there. But we would hope that, you know, if anything, maybe we're leading by some example that like, hey, you don't have to drive every single time you leave your house. You know, you don't have to drive to your mailbox if you're somebody whose mailbox is a distance away or whatever. Try walking. Maybe you could use the exercise. I know I could use more exercise, especially around this pandemic crap. But yeah, so the last thing about this software stuff is that's the 60 minutes thing, you know. Of course, you can go watch this on YouTube. Just punch in, obviously I punched in 60 minutes vaccine and I did a search for that. And there it is right there. It's 1 day ago. David Martin reports on the military efforts underway to inoculate 300 million Americans with an anticipated COVID-19 vaccine. An anticipated COVID-19 vaccine that they already got stockpiled. Yep. Fuck you, liar. Tiberius. Here's the program is named after this dude. Sorry to say that, but I don't like liars. You know what I mean? So if I can't say fuck you to a liar, then what's this country? What are they fighting for? You know what I mean? And they're turning their guns in on the American people now, so to speak. Like, that's the way I feel. If you don't believe me now, maybe you'll believe me tomorrow. Once this World War III kicks off, what do they always do? Especially if that Democrat gets into power. FDR was Democrat, served 4 terms, died in office, did the concentration camps for the so-called Japs, right? What he called the Japs. The Japanese Americans. Not Japanese Americans. You know what I mean? And they decided that the Japanese were too vital to Hawaii's economy to camp them up. Like, that would just destroy Hawaii's economy. So they just went ahead and just did the West Coast ones. And the reason they did that shit was so that they could take back over the business that the Japanese Americans had, you know, created, like their business that they had built. They want to take away all the business and property away from those people and give it back to special interest white motherfuckers. And that's what they did. Straight up, look up the history on it. You know what I mean? And they put them in the camp. FDR died with that fucking executive order still on pause, still there, even after towards the end of World War II and stuff. And I'm pretty sure it was paused before he died. It may have still been active. There may have still been camps before he died, but I want to say, look it up, of course, that he had paused it where it's just like, oh, temporary hold. Can't even fucking wipe it out and put it through the shredder, right? Oh, just temporary hold on it, And they were put into slave labor camps, basically, the way I see it. They were treated good. They're treated a lot better than the Jewish people over in World War II, right? We'll just make a real big deal about that Holocaust, because what happened there is exactly the kind of thing that could happen anywhere in the world. You know what I mean? That started out the same thing, where they're just persecuting people, get the so-called infected, get them back into that corner, Oh, they're fine. We'll just take all their property. Just like we'll bring George Soros along for the ride too. He can help us confiscate their property, right? His own people that he turncoats against. And, and the next thing you know, they're in their camps. And it's like, oh, well, you've got till this time to come report to the camp. You get like next thing you know, you just have like till tomorrow at 8 a.m. to come report to this camp. That's the way it fucking works in the United States, not even in Nazi Germany. United States. And then you better go straight to that camp. You know what I mean? Like, you go straight to that station and you go put your shit in storage for indefinitely, and now you're going to a 100% pure social commie camp where you're going to produce all your own goods. You're going to use your trade if that's needed at that camp, and you're going to be self-reliant. It's like they're going to make you do your own. They're not even going to fucking provide for you. You know what I mean? They should be pitting you up in a nice ass hotel if they're going to fucking be worried about you or something. You know what I mean? Like, they're putting you out in some camp in the middle of nowhere, and then you got to work and make all your own food. Well, you're making twice as much food than you need for that camp. So guess what? You're also supplying the food for the fucking military that is persecuting you and putting you part of the persecution, supposedly freeing you. I don't know. I don't want to argue too much either way on that. And like I said, don't think that I'm like pure anti-military or whatever, but I am pure anti-bullshit. So this is Tiberius Caesar Augustus right here. He was around during the time of the Savior, who they incorrectly call Jesus. His name is Yahweh Yashah, for Yah saves. This first part is supposed to be Yah, or you could say Yah, right? And then this last part is supposed to be, well, this is actually a horrid butchering of the name, the suffix shua, which means cries, but it's supposed to be Yashah, which means save. So it should be Yashah or Yashah or Yahweh Yashah, just so you know, which is the same person in the Bible, just without changing the name to some fake ass name. That's exactly, I'm not saying it's a different person. It's the same person you're probably thinking of. It's just not the little skinny white guy that they invented in 500 AD or whenever, it's not that. But anyway, around the time of the real Messianic Savior, his first coming was, right here you could see this is BC, late BC to early AD years. And that's when this guy, he wasn't the guy, don't mistake him for Pontius Pilate. So Pontius Pilate was the local dude, right? This is the Roman emperor dude. He's like the big dog. Like, Pontius Pilate was more like the state governor, and this guy was more like the national president, you could think. So that's who he is. And if you look in here, it says, the gloomiest of men, right? Remembered as a dark, reclusive, somber ruler. That's who they've named this thing after. What do we got here? Some other... Let's go down here. One of the trips is around his death. I mean, I definitely implore you to look in for yourself here and make your own decision on stuff, but I jump to my own conclusions, right? Or just make my own little whatever suggestions. So he died in March of AD 37, a few months shy of his 78th birthday. Somebody relates that the emperor appears to have stopped breathing, and that Caligula, who was at Tiberius's villa, was being congratulated on his succession to the empire when news arrived that the emperor had revived and was recovering his faculties. Those who had moments before recognized Caligula as Augustus fled. Those who had moments before recognized Caligula as Augustus fled in fear of the emperor's wrath. As Augustus, sorry. So basically, the guys who recognized his successor fled in fear of the emperor's wrath, while Marco took advantage of the chaos to have Tiberius smothered with his own bedclothes. Suetonius reports several rumors, including that the emperor had been poisoned by Caligula, starved and smothered with a pillow, that recovering and finding himself deserted by his attendants, he attempted to rise from his couch but fell dead. According to Cassius Dio, Caligula, fearing that the emperor would recover, refused Tiberius's request for food, insisting that he needed warmth, not food. Then, assisted by Marco, he smothered the emperor in his bedclothes. And I just see that as like an abstract, when I see this, of what I think about what's going on personally that I see with COVID is this exact thing, we're recovering, we're fine, look what President Trump, he got COVID and he's fine, he's recovering, and they're like, oh no, don't give them vitamins and nutrients and stuff like that. They need the vaccine. They need that quote unquote warmth, not food, not vitamins and minerals and sunlight, and no petri dish face diaper mask against their face. Then, assisted by Macro, he smothered them in their own bedclothes. Smothered him in his bedclothes. You know what I mean? So it's like total freaking abstract of what the paranoia I got going on with that, where it's like, oh really, they're gonna come in and smother you with that motherfucking vaccine. How many vaccines are they giving you? They're already telling you, you don't need food, you need warmth. You know what I mean? Oh really? Well, that warmth killed him, supposedly. After his death, the Senate refused to vote Tiberius the divine honors that had been paid to Augustus, and mobs filled the streets yelling, "To the Tiber with Tiberius." So the Tiber, I have it open right here, it's one of the biggest rivers, Italian, the third longest river in Italy and longest river in central Italy. So they wanted to throw him in the river. The bodies of criminals were typically thrown into the river instead of being buried or burnt. However, the emperor was cremated and his ashes were quietly laid in a mausoleum, later to be scattered in AD 410 during the sack of Rome. In his will, he left his powers jointly to those guys. And Caligula's first act on becoming princeps was to void Tiberius's will. Huh. So yeah, that's interesting. That kind of reminds me of almost like, just going off on the abstract tip of like Trump, that whole thing where like mobs are filling the streets, like throw them in the river, like that's how people think about Trump and stuff. And it's like, really, you fucking idiots, if you think that about Trump. Like, I'm not saying whatever, like I don't think that any of these high up politicians, they're all tainted, all right? Don't get me wrong. I don't know specifically how or whatever, but that's my assumption, and I just got to stick to it, right? But I'm not going to like falsely accuse people of stuff. If it looks like I'm like spitting whatever stuff out, I'm not trying to say like, oh, off with their heads or nothing like that with people. I'm just saying like the way I feel, you know what I mean? Like if I feel like somebody's being a snake, then I'm going to call it at them, and like shoo them away or whatever, like that kind of stuff in my weird, wacky ways. But, like I don't like Joe Biden. I'll put that out there right now. I think that guy's a straight snake, but a crooked snake. But anyway, with Trump, and I've known that about Biden since as much as I've ever known about that guy, and this is coming from somebody who's way more liberal than you could ever have called yourself if you think you're a liberal. Fight me on that one. But anyway, with Trump, I was just digging in recently in I was saving memes and stuff when I was posting a lot of memes on the internet, reposting memes. I like to collect memes, stuff like that. And I went back to March 12th, and I was still collecting memes. I wasn't necessarily like anti-Trump per se, but I definitely would never identify as like a full-on conservative or nothing back then. But I didn't like the way the Roman year had started off, where like Trump had bombed the guy in Iran. And I just thought, oh, this is World War II, this is it. And I started like actually creating memes and putting them out about, World War III. I mean, if I said two, but yeah. So then I was starting to look at Trump like this tyrant guy, like, whoa, okay, and I started even like comparing him to Mussolini and stuff like that. And then I noticed this COVID thing creeping in. I'm like, it's not going to come here. We've seen all this stuff in the past. It never comes here, but this is freaky close. And then, of course, they're like, oh, it's coming here. Even the news was like, and the Democrats were like, oh, it's not going to come here. Da, da, da. And I was like, yeah, damn straight, it's not going to come here. It's some fucking bullshit. Well, anyway, I noticed that in my meme collection, even up to that point, into almost mid-March, that I had even been saving memes of Trump with like tyrant, comparing him to Mussolini and stuff like that, because I saw this fascism coming in with this, and I mean literal fascism. I mean textbook fascism. I don't mean little pussy Antifa fascism. I'm talking textbook fascism. You know what I mean? You think this stuff that Antifa, not that there's not some dangerous psychos in that group, but they're the least of it, and they don't even know what they are fascism. I mean, they are little minions for this kind of stuff right here. That's what you are if you're Antifa, straight up. Not accusing, just letting you know, face to face. This is fascism right here. See this? This is fascism in a nutshell. This is a bundle of fasces, which is a bundle of sticks, okay? This is an Roman Italian institution right here. Why do you think Mussolini was fascist? Hitler was Nazi, right? They created the word Nazi because it was very similar to fascism, but this was Hitler's, one of his mentors. You know what I mean? And then Stalin was the so-called commie, the communist, right? So you had the commie, the fasci, and the Nazi. And they were really, they're pretty damn similar, right? So anyway, what it all boils down to is it's fascism, is what it is. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about fascism. And that's what I saw coming up, because the Roman Empire is a fascist empire. And like I said, I'm not talking lowercase f, Antifa, wannabe, don't even know what the fuck they're talking about fascism. I'm talking about real fascism, okay? That's what it is. So I saw that creeping in, and that's what's creeping in, because this is what's ultimately going on here, folks. This is the reviving, the little groans of, how Tiberius was getting up because they thought they'd slaughtered him. That's what's going on with Rome right now, too. That's another abstraction to play on right there, is that, Rome is trying to get back up. Rome is like, hey, I never fell, motherfuckers. You're tripping. Go look at the architecture on your Capitol buildings. Go look at your court systems. Go look at everything you call anything, and look at what that structure is modeled on. It's all modeled on Rome. Okay, so don't think Rome went anywhere. It was just taking a nap for a while. And it's coming back. And that's what's predicted in the Bible to whatever degree, So it will never fully come back. It will always be mixed and confused to whatever degree, but there is going to be this battle for a global empire, and this is the end times. Welcome to it. So thanks for watching.